Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this session brought to you by our friends at Devo. This session is titled AI and Automation in the SOC, and we have a great panel joining us here today to discuss that topic. I'm Dave Bittner. I am the producer and host of the Cyberwire Daily Podcast. And joining me is Josh Copeland. He is the security director at AT&T. We've got Luke Comtois, who is senior analyst for Cybersecurity Operations Center from Air Canada. Mitch Mellard is threat intelligence consultant with Talion, and we're hoping to have join us Gladman DB, who is a cybersecurity managing director at Omnicom. He's having a few technical issues that have delayed him joining us, but we hope that he is going to join us here as the session goes on. So, gentlemen, let's jump in here. As I mentioned, our topic today is AI and automation's role in the SOC. I would love to start off just by quickly going around the horn and getting a brief introduction from each of you, and then maybe also you can touch on what your relationship with is, your contact with your organization's SOC. Josh, why don't I start with you?
Sure. I'm cybersecurity director with AT&T. I'm also an adjunct professor at Talion University. So I have two hats that I wear. Within AT&T, I'm essentially a vCISO for our state and local government customers. So I deal a lot with our SOC as a service, as well as all of our customers' independent SOCs, doing advisory work and, giving them best practices and helping them tune and tweak everything to, the maximum extent possible. So lots of fingers in the pot, so to speak.
Yeah. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm doing SOC work for Air Canada, mostly doing SOAR automation, dealing with fraud, because we have a joint team with the fraud team. So yeah, happy here.
All right, and Mitchell?
I'm the threat intelligence consultant at Talion, and I've worked in a number of roles throughout the SOC. It's essentially been the same current team since its inception back at the days at BAE Systems to its spin-off now as an independent company. And I handle executive briefings, workshops, OSINT engagements, and anything that concerns our clients or they might be worried about.
All right, well, let's jump in and start talking about AI. I think we're kind of at an interesting moment here because it's fair to say that AI isn't new to cybersecurity. I mean, I remember it's probably 5 years ago that AI was all the talk at the RSA conference. It was the hot topic then. But I guess what's different is that this is a different kind of AI we're talking about here with the release of these large language models that have kind of captured the general public's imagination and kind of reinvigorated the enthusiasm for all things AI. Can we talk about that? I mean, I'd love to get each of your comments on where we are when it comes to AI. I mean, is this overhyped? Is this a useful tool? Luke, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, but I think if we're talking about large language model, that's the thing that's where most people are talking right now. I think it's a little bit frightening. I see a little people using it and seeing like the sorcerer apprentice phenomena, where people don't know what it actually is and what it does. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good thing that could come out of it, but we need to check like how we're using that new these new tools.
Yeah, Mitch, how about you?
It's kind of, we have to differentiate, right? Because all the rage right now is, as you say, it's the LLMs, it's the large language models, but AI has been applied as kind of a label to so many things over the last 5 years. There have been booms in behavioral analytics, there's been booms in machine learning that have caused a lot of buzz. So when we talk about AI in the context of what people are really worried about right now, it is these large language models, and they are overhyped is probably the right word, but as with anything that kind of brings that barrier to entry right down and makes it accessible to a regular person that can say, could you write me, they can type in full sentence English, can you write me a Python script that does X, Y, Z? And it spits them out something that works. That's not something that someone like that has ever had access to before. So it's blurring the line for regular people between what is kind of, it's to use Luke's analogy, it's straight up magic to some people who just see it spit out things that they genuinely do not know in a million years how it could have got there.
Josh, does that match your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the kind of interesting pieces is threat actors using AI, both the behavior analytics and all of the machine learning, but even using the large language modeling to craft phishing emails that now have perfect English, perfect grammar, are going to pass all of your sanity checks that you previously would look at for this is a potential scam email. They spelled my name wrong. It's definitely going to be one of those huge hurdles. And then even with the advance on the back end where they're creating polymorphic malware based off of AI scanning of a device. So it literally will see what you're vulnerable to and write malware to that vulnerability on the fly.
Yeah.
Let's dig in specifically on what place, if any, this has within the SOC itself. I mean, is there a potential here for it to be a useful tool? And I'm curious, in your experience, do you know folks or perhaps your own teams who are actually making use of this already?
I think we're making use of like AI, but the large language model is something we're looking at, but we're not necessarily ready to put it in production. I think one of the problem is that like the threat actor can use it and have like not good result, and it won't necessarily matter as much as if we're making we're using it badly, and it starts like spitting lies and things like that. That's the problem I see for putting it in production right now.
Yeah. Mitch, do you concur with that? I mean, is the reliability still an issue here?
Absolutely. It's something that the older forms of AI, as we've talked about before, kind of behavioral analytics, machine learning, other elements like that, things that we've been employing in our SOC for a long time at various degrees of usability. But large language models at the moment, as they stand, as part of the threat intel team, we explored kind of if it could be used to give reliable information to vulnerability disclosures in an extremely quick manner, just as kind of a proof of concept. But I'm sure as anyone who's used any of the kind of modern LLMs, ChatGPT, or any of its contemporaries, sometimes it gets things wrong, and sometimes it just outright lies. Sometimes it spits out with great confidence completely factually incorrect information. We've seen it give mitigations from other actions within a similar article, so we think we know how it got to that, but sometimes it's just invented CVE codes that we have been unable to find anywhere that sensibly just don't exist. So I think there's a long way to go before it's just straight up usable in a regular SOC in that manner. There's some merit to talking about perhaps an internal large language model that you could build if your company is at a certain level of scale. But I'm willing to venture the vast majority of SOCs don't have that kind of amount of data to train something like that to the point where it could be valuable.
Yeah, Josh, I think Mitch brings up a really interesting point, which is this notion that as part of what the large language models like ChatGPT are doing, any information you put into them becomes part of their corpus of information. To what degree, as a security leader, is that a concern for you?
For me, that's absolutely huge. When you look at, and it's not just these new, hotness of ChatGPT. We're talking about any of the tools that you use on your Zoom calls to transcribe. We're talking about your Grammarly. That data is going somewhere. How much stuff do you type on your laptop that is potentially proprietary information, intellectual property, usernames, passwords? When you're doing presentations, what type of data are you presenting that's being transcribed by these services that are going back into their training model to make it better, faster, stronger? And largely with any of these things is, it's how are they trained? To Mitch's point, you get a lot of garbage in, garbage out with any of these services, where if the training material is not very carefully curated to remove bias and be absolutely accurate to what you needed to do, you're going to get, these AI hallucinations, whether it be from, traditional machine learning or from these large language models.
We've seen a number of organizations who are offering products that claim to be private versions of these. We can spin one up and it'll be inclusive to your organization, and none of that data will go anywhere else. Is the notion of that appealing to you all? Luke, can I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, this is appealing, but the problem is you don't necessarily control the training data, and I mean, for internal use, and if people have to understand that you need to check the data, because the problem is, like I think Mitchell said, it's convincing. It can spit you out some answers and give you like a reason why it came up with the answer, and then when you start digging, and sometimes you find that it doesn't make it looks like it makes sense, but like the sources are bad, and it just came out to give you just lies that are convincing.
Yeah, I've seen people describe it as BS as a service, which I think is, certainly not completely off the mark. Mitch, how about you? I mean, if we could take away the specter of the information being shared, does that make this sort of thing more attractive?
I think it does, yes. The main risk is the information being shared, to be honest. We saw in the incident with Samsung essentially being the big high profile one, where their employees were essentially feeding it information without realizing that is now a source that other people can query in a roundabout way, and not a traditional database, but a database nonetheless. So it's very much. Is it useful though? I'm not sure, because traditional just hosting customer data, retrieving what you want, performing investigations can all be done the traditional way in a much more concise manner that doesn't give you back data that is easily represented in just English language text like these large language models are specialized in. For external engagements, client-based marketing, things of that nature, absolutely, this is a valuable tool that could cut down workload times and help people who aren't. If you take away that spectre of it can lie to you, if someone isn't very up to date on a certain topic, it can provide a great refresher and can pull information from sources that you just don't have or aren't aware of.
Yeah, I have a colleague who's a chemist, and he was telling me recently that there was a tool, a software platform that he and his colleagues where he works, they were hoping to purchase, and they hadn't been able to get management to pull the trigger on it. But then suddenly with ChatGPT and these sorts of tools, the new version came out. Good news, here's a new version, and it includes large language model, artificial intelligence. And this, of course, captured the imagination of the powers that be in his organization, and they got the approval to get the product. He's happy because he gets the new tool that he wants to use, isn't using the LLM stuff at all, but his leadership was captured by the marketing message, by the hype. Is that a peril of its own? I mean, Josh, there is no shortage of hype with this technology. It seems like everybody is kind of grafting it on to everything.
Yeah, and that's really kind of one of the big cases right now, is that you go to RSA conference, you go to Black Hat, you go to DEF CON, and everyone's touting their product as AI backed. And it's really peel back the layers. What do you mean by AI? Are you using machine learning? Are you using large language modeling? Are you doing, what's really just SOAR capabilities with some minor AI augmentation? And then what's the ethics behind the data sources that you use to build your AI background and the information that's going into that. There are lawsuits going on all over the place for, AI, large language models, ingesting data but never licensing it appropriately and then spitting that out. So we know that you used it because otherwise you wouldn't have this information. The same issue that we had with Sony where folks were putting it in and now it's being spit out elsewhere. And then even if you take it into just a bespoke solution that you own in your own cloud, where did the data come from? Are you sure it's data that you want to be using for training purposes for your tools and your software? And that becomes kind of that magic sauce that everyone says they have, but when you really talk to them, have them explain exactly how they're doing it. And a lot of times you find out that it's really not as, wow, sparkle, good stuff as they are presenting it, but they will totally slap the label AI on there and, sell you, 100,000 units.
So, are there specific questions you think people should be asking here when they're vetting these sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. What is your training set? How did you develop it? How did you address bias in your training set? How are you addressing, AI hallucination? And then what is your actual terms of service for the data that I'm putting in it? Talk to me about exactly how you're using the data to make it do the things that you're saying that you're able to do, and peel back those layers. If they can't do that, then they don't understand their product well enough.
Mitch, do you agree with that approach?
Absolutely. And I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about when you train one of these models, at what point does it become marketable? Because at the moment, people are just kind of really experimenting with this technology. They're throwing everything into it. The first iteration of ChatGPT that started all of this craze off was essentially they took a subset of the internet, a large subset of the internet from 2021 backwards, retroactively, threw it into the model and trained it. And for the first month at least, there was no additional data going into that. If you wanted to query anything that had happened in the news, any kind of local politics, to anything that had occurred in the time between, it just didn't have that data. So I think there's a valuable conversation to be had if you could create something that perhaps doesn't need to be updated with every new facet of everything that's been created. Then the model itself wouldn't be, I don't know if poisoned is the right word, but there have been people speculating that ChatGPT in particular has been watered down because a lot of the information that's been placed into it is making it dumber because it's been exposed to just the generality of people who will use it. And rather than getting kind of I should say curated responses, it's been exposed to everything. So it's been fed more misinformation. So if you were able to produce something that was for, say, if you are a Python programmer, we have created a model which contains a host of, like an old programmer's cheat sheet, but in large language model form, answers to problems that could arise, things for any specific snippet of any specific business to fulfill a specific job role. I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there about providing a model for that role that is curated, and then further information does not change it.
Luke, I think of your situation of potentially being really interesting here. Like I could imagine, in the airline business, you have all of those technicians and maintenance folks and all those sorts of things. And if you had some sort of bespoke system where all the maintenance manuals, all of the procedures, all of those things could be fed into a system like that, I could imagine great utility of being able to say, so this my airplane is showing these symptoms, and what are the possible issues here? Is that the kind of thing that is interesting to you all, or are we still in the science fiction area?
I mean, that's the thing. Like would be great, but the problem right now is we're flying people in airplanes. I mean, we can't take the risk of like
falling out
in
of the
maintenance
sky.
are doing doing the wrong thing to the airplane. I mean, it needs to be Like that's the problem. If it's gonna spit lie, there's no like the one problem too is the diverging like how was the AI trained? What was the goal? The diverging goals? Like what was the goal of the AI, and what's our goal? It might look this like to be aligned, but sometimes it's totally different. I mean, when we ask a question, I want the truth. I don't want the most plausible answer to my question. I like I want the truth, and I like but the model is trained in the matter as it will try to find an answer to please me instead of basically it's just trying to like what does the person need. So will it's not, I don't think it's at the point of really lying, but it's just like spitting out things that make sense to answer my question. And the other thing is like if you're using that kind of AI to build code, at one point will it be good enough that it will detect that you're writing bad code and give you more bad code because it detected that you were writing codes with security issues in it, and it'll just like, okay, you're trying to build a software with some backdoors, so yeah, here we go, here's the rest of the software that with backdoors because I detected you were writing bad code. I mean that's the thing that a little bit like divergence of goals like between the user and or understanding that the AI goal is not necessarily what you're thinking it is.
Yeah, there is this black box element to all of this. You'll see a lot of the folks who are deep into the research here when you ask them how it works, and it seems to me like the answer a lot of the time is we're not really sure, but it seems to, we get these results out of it. Is that in itself enough to give security professionals pause? Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. As a security professional, what you want to do is you want to know exactly how something works. So not only do you know how to protect it, but also know what it's vulnerable to. You could look at it from like SOC perspective. The holy grail in AI would be a tool that allows you to go out, scrape the internet for indicators of compromise that would automatically be able to build alerts based off of what it pulls in automatically and create and try to remedy those issues in a automated fashion, as well as being able to identify based off of human action of what you're doing from an analyst perspective and be able to create automated tasks on that and reduce the human workload. But if I don't know what the voodoo behind the veil is, I can't trust that to be in my production environment. I'm going to play with that in a lab and try to figure it out. But if I'm not really sure how it works, I'm not going to put people's lives, people's data at risk.
Mitchell, what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to the conversation of when we were first seeing training based on for self-driving cars really was the big one. All of a sudden, every time you had a capture or a prompt, it was, oh, select how many bicycles you see here, select how many cones you see here, select how many buses or bridges you see. All of that data has been fed into a giant training set for self-driving cars, but all of that is someone building bots which then create more bots, and then, oh, this one can recognize traffic cones, this one can recognize the shape of a bike. When you talk to people, they don't realize we were at the point like 5-10 years ago where we already have machines building machines that we don't know entirely how the second one works because humans didn't make it. We just know what it does and we can apply that to a specific purpose. Now that sounds kind of Skynet-y when you break it down like that, but large language models aren't really that level of to a person who's never used one before and they type in a query, or I guess I call them queries out of habit, prompts as they're kind of being called. It's that disambiguation piece. It's just all you are doing is you're putting information into a database when you type, and when you're putting these prompts together, you are aiming to retrieve something, just like someone who is querying a SQL database or anything similar to that. There was an instance I had in the office. This was about 2 months ago now, where someone asked me they came over, they tapped me on the shoulder, they said, "You're familiar with regex, how do I retrieve this from this?" At which point I pulled up, I assume many people who are not programmers who dabble in such things have a cheat sheet. I showed them my document, I went down 5 lines, I said, you want this? This is going to be your most efficient. You know what, I'll send you over my cheat sheet in case you need this in the future. And then about an hour later, there was an organic conversation that came up about ChatGPT, large language models in the office, at which point people started trading their prompts. And then it was kind of that light bulb moment looking back at, what I've just seen there, prompts are people's cheat sheets because they want to get certain results. And it's exactly the same as someone having a list of queries to retrieve specific data they want from a database. It's just a slightly more human way of doing it. So again, that whole lowers the barrier to entry, makes it more accessible, which is what makes it alluring, what makes it dangerous also.
You know, I think about this technology and shadow IT, and I think in some ways things like ChatGPT are irresistible to folks. They're fun, they're interesting, they seem magical. Where do each of you stand when it comes to even allowing the use of these in your environments? And how do you educate your users to say, look, I understand, you want to use this because of all those reasons, but here's what you need to know. Luke, can we start with you there?
It's kind of, yeah, we don't allow the use of these tools for critical environments and things like that, but we're starting to see what it can be used. But yeah, it's always difficult, even if we're blocking everything. Like, I mean, you could use another machine to access these things, and so we're offering some of these services, but in in-house manner. But yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Joshua, how about you?
Is largely, whether we like it or not, the CISO department is typically the office of no. I like to try to phrase it as yes, but. And this is one of those cases of, yes, you can use it, but only in these circumstances. You're not using our intellectual property. You're not using anything that touches our customer database. We're not doing anything that touches our production network. You're not putting any of our proprietary information into the system. You want to use Grammarly? Okay, we might allow that under a very specific case where it's not on your corporate computer. You can only use it to, edit papers in an offline, outside of our environment type of manner. And then ideally it's something we've purchased. If we want to use it, we're purchasing it, we're licensing it, we understand what the risk is, and we've gone through the appropriate, risk-based analysis to control it, to put policy around it, and to make sure that we're using it in the way that we want to use it, and not, wild west. But the reality is almost every organization out there has shadow AI. It just exists, and people are using it every day.
Yeah, Mitchell, what's your experience here?
So we operate as an MSSP. So clients that we have over a huge variety of sectors trust us with their data, and therefore we have to be incredibly careful in this respect, because it's not just our company's data and absorbing the risk in terms of anything we experiment with there. Our company is relatively small, but the footprint we have in terms of the companies that we protect is massive. So we have to be very careful. So anything, policies have been very clear on this, even going as far back as just founding the company. You have to define, say someone from marketing wants to use a PDF converter. Nothing that is client data can go in anything that could potentially leave the estate under any circumstances, unless it's approved. So that is how we have to view it in this case. So experimentation for us is very much, I don't want to say curtailed, but we have to be extremely careful because of that environment. On the opposite, however, what we see coming in from clients in terms of, especially as part of our threat intelligence function, one of the top questions is, how can we use this? How can we do it safely? Because a lot of people see their competitors taking up this, and for better or worse, it's often the kind of inclination of C-suite individuals, not saying all C-suite individuals, Josh, but they will often go towards, if something is being discussed as much as AI and it's in the public consciousness as much as AI and large language models at the moment, they will not want to be left behind. So they will want to push for it as quickly as possible. And yes, while security functions might be able to advise them to pump the brakes, and just as Josh said, CISOs, the office of no when it goes to technical risk. But often you will be told, okay, we need to proceed, we're proceeding, but you get to control kind of how often and how hard the brakes are pumped so you can proceed in a controlled manner. I mean, just the level of public consciousness it's reached. Like I saw 2 days ago, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, I went to the store across the road from where I live, and there's a new flavor of Coke Zero, and it says future flavor designed in conjunction with AI. What do you even say to that? It's you're telling me a CISO is going to be subjected to that level of marketing and public awareness, and they're not going to immediately go into their business environment and say, why aren't we doing this? I want to explore this now, and I want to see how we can profit from it, or we're going to get left behind.
What's your answer then? I mean, Mitchell, let's stay with you here. I mean, what do you say to that board level person who says, we've got to get on board with this because everybody else is?
Often I find myself, because I'm primarily in the threat intelligence world, I find myself being the doomsayer. I spend a lot of time telling people what they should be scared about and upcoming trends. And with AI, it's very much telling people what they should be aware of if they're going to proceed. So kind of a lot of the risks that we've already highlighted, be aware that if you incorporate it in your organization, you're going to be feeding data into it, especially one of these all-encompassing AI models like ChatGPT. But then you've got to explore sanctioned and unsanctioned use, even things that you wouldn't think of. Points that Josh has made before, Grammarly or anything similar, the integrations in Microsoft Teams, anything that a company might be using. There's so many components and plugins that have now been established, which just feed into one large language model or another. It's very difficult to escape it, and it's very difficult to be sanitary in that respect. But if you are proceeding with this, if you're going to make a product with it, it may be different, because that you're then going to be the one selling that, offering the specific set of training data, whatever it may be. But going forward, if you are going to base part of your business around this, you need to be hyper aware of how it functions. You need to be hyper aware of any information that is placed into it. No one wants to be accused of a breach and then they're getting brought in front of the I'm not sure what it is over the pond, but the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK, or the equivalent governing body, because you've had a data leakage. And it's not even for a malicious purpose. It's just employees who aren't that technically adept who have used this technology. Again, that conversation keeps coming up. When you bring the barrier for entry down to where people who are non-technical can participate, unfortunately, accidents are going to happen and disclosure is going to happen.
Yeah, the boards have to make sure that their errors and omissions policies are up to date, right? Luke, how about you? I mean, what sort of communications do you have with the powers that be in the organization who are curious about this and looking to folks like you for guidance?
I mean, I'm lower down in the organization. I mean, I deal mostly with the repercussion of these decisions. But yeah, it's like Michael or Joshua said, it's a balancing act. I mean, you don't want to be the company that's not using it, but you don't want to be the company that gets a leak or a big accident because like they didn't know what they were doing. So yeah, like I think that's the I don't really know what to to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Josh?
and that's the problem too. It's like we don't know what it is.
It's still early days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Josh, what are your insights here?
So I look at it from this perspective. There are advantages to AI. There just are. You have to figure out what's the best way to implement that as a executive of your organization, you're still meeting your fiduciary duty to take care of the organization. So the example I will use is in North Texas, a lawyer used AI to create their legal brief. Great. It was a beautifully written legal brief. When it went to the judge and the judge went through it and started checking the references, the AI had hallucinated some of these references. It referenced cases that didn't exist. That's bad. Now, there's a separate judge, also based out of Texas, that released a ruling for his court that you are allowed to use AI to create your legal briefs. However, a lawyer must completely review every document, and they have to sign off on it and risk their bar license if it is wrong. So that's a kind of that happy medium between the two where, yes, you can save hundreds of hours doing, AI generated legal briefs, but you still have that check and balance and oversight of, am I getting what I actually want? Is it legitimate output? Is it something that is going to be legally binding and upheld, and have that check and balance and still maintain your duty to your organization? And that's where you have to start finding that balance of, okay, I'm going to use this AI program to, develop and do my sales funnel channel, because it's going to be able to go out and scrape things like LinkedIn for people who are talking about this particular topic and be able to build customized messages based off of the stuff in their profile and send out those mass emails. But what am I doing to make sure that I'm doing that legally and ethically? Where am I storing the data? How am I getting it? Am I sure that this is all publicly available information? Or is it something that the AI is able to get into that maybe it shouldn't? When you kind of have that check and balance, you come to that kind of happy medium and you get to that yes, but instead of just a straight no.
Yeah, it's a really interesting insight. I mean, it makes me wonder, how much time are we actually saving? In your example of the lawyer, if you save all this time by having the large language model do your legal briefings, but then you have to go through and check everything manually because you're not sure you can trust it, have you actually saved time versus just doing it yourself from the get-go?
If you've ever done a legal brief, yes, you're saving a lot of time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But it strikes me. Go ahead, Mitchell.
No, I think it harks back to the age-old question of security, which is convenience versus security. Every time you'll have someone in your organization say, what do you mean you want me to use a password manager and have a different password for all of these services? What do you mean my password's been found in a credential breach and I've got to reset it? I have a system that I've used for years. What do you mean I have to use multi-factor authentication, so I have to sign in with my phone every time? There's always that push and pull of convenience that isn't exclusive to AI, and I just see this as another kind of another emergence of that, in terms of people are going, yes, you can use it to straight up, oh, I have a document I have to put together in 10 minutes. You put in a prompt, you get it out with no sanity checking. You have to then accept that risk that there is a high likelihood of errors. But then if you put in that review, it's almost like when you have a data controller as part of kind of an incident response engagement to kind of, someone has to be, and I think this is where Josh's example works really well. This works best when someone is responsible for the output, that has an idea of what the output should look like. We're still at the stage where there needs to be a level of sanity check because it's not advanced enough and it's still error prone enough that just isn't possible. And if you speak to some people, they'd say maybe that's a good thing.
Right. Somebody has to sign off and say, I'm vouching for this result. Yeah.
Ultimately, AI is not replacing humans in any way, shape, or form. it was potentially changing the role that we have in the process. So in the future, you might have AI that's doing your tier 1 triage, that's going to, filter out all your false positives from your SIM and, be able to automatically kick off SOAR capabilities. But you're still going to have that human piece for the things that AI just isn't smart enough to do yet. So they're still going to be evaluating the things that are a true positive, but are not something that's already predefined. And the advantage there is it allows you to focus more on what's really important. I could have a SOC analyst that spends 8 hours a day closing out, false positives for 7 of those hours and 1 hour that they're working on something that's legitimately important. Or I can have an AI-based capability that does most of that, grunt work for them, and they're able to actually work on in near real time potential breaches. So you've got to kind of massage it to where it's doing what you want in a way that you want, that you can accept and control the risk.
Well, we've just got a few minutes left here, and I would love to wrap up by, again, sort of going around the horn here and asking each of you for maybe some parting words of wisdom here for folks who are working in the SOC or managing a SOC. Any advice for putting guardrails on this technology, or best putting it to use? Again, let me start with you, Luke. Any advice here?
I think it's like it's from any new tool. You really have to understand how it works and what it does before using it for something critical. It goes back to being responsible.
Yeah. Mitchell?
Very much the same sentiment. Trust but verify. It's a really useful tool, but I think in our specific business, there's such a focus on data needs to be so precise in terms of where it's come from, in terms of you can see a tree of what's happened, you're able to pinpoint a process and tie it to a specific incident, that this kind of generative AI at the moment is just not accurate enough for our purposes. So there's going to be a lot of experimentation, I think, in the coming years, and it will reach a point where it is a useful tool, but it will probably be supplementary. And because of the business that we're in, we have to be a lot more cautious of how we implement this rather than other businesses that will be looking to make it advantageous, or our clients, I suppose.
Joshua, you get the final word.
Sure. It really comes down to build your business case. What is the reason that you want to do this? What value generating proposition have you built around the use of AI? And then have you evaluated the risk to reward ratio for this technology? And if you can build the right business case and you put the right left and right guardrails on it, you have the opportunity to really advance your organization in ways that just aren't humanly possible. But ultimately, you have to understand risk. What am I really doing? What kind of data do I have? And if you're doing it right, you have it in a development, test, and production type environment where you're being very, very controlled and you're making sure that you're doing things in the right way before you're getting that code out in production where it's touching real live data with intellectual property and people's stuff in it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Again, thank you all for taking the time to share your expertise here. Once again, Josh Copeland is Security Director at AT&T. Luke Comtois is a Senior Analyst with Air Canada. And Mitch Mellard is a Threat Intelligence Consultant with Talion. And of course, we'd like to thank our friends at Devo for making all of this possible. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you found some value in today's conversation, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much.